This lecture is already made into, it's a paper, and my colleagues, some of them read it, and I incorporated some of their suggestions. And right now the paper, it is with the journal, waiting for the peer review process to start. So the lecture is entitled Gypsy, the Forgotten Children of Punjab. Actually, it is a lecture more about ethnicity and ethno-mobilization and their struggle to find a place in Europe. But first, I'm going to start by outlining the importance of the topic. After I would outline the importance of the topic, I'm going to go and outline my argument. If you are interested in definition, concept definition, and methodology, I did not put it on the slide, so I will be more than happy to answer your questions. And after that, I'm going to go to my conclusions and my recommendations and leave time for your questions. Okay, first, the Roma is the largest and the most discriminated minority of Europe. We believe that there are an estimate of 10 to 12 million Roma living in Europe, and the majority of them live actually in Eastern Europe. After the 1990s, Roma's migration from Eastern to Western Europe, because of the bad economic conditions in Eastern Europe, has had the following consequences. It has become the main threat to the movement of people in the European Union. So basically, people who say that ethnicity is not important in international relations or politics or internal politics, or the way you want to put it, this is a case that illustrates the importance of ethnicity in politics. It has truly become a main threat to the freedom of movement. Cameroon threatened that he wants to change the rules of the game in the European Union. Angela Merkel actually told him that he can take the UK and leave the Union. She's not going to change those rules. However, the truth of the matter is that several countries, such as UK and France, they already passed bills that are aimed at Roma, declaring more or less declaring them a national security threat to their countries. The same problem has fueled the rise of right-wing party in Eastern and Western Europe. You have to understand that as long as the communist system existed, till 1990s, the Roma of Eastern Europe were kept in their countries of origin. Once 1990s came, they started migrating to West. So has the rising of the right-wing party in Eastern and Western Europe, particularly in, we have France, in which the Front National is campaigning strongly on an anti-Roma platform. We have the Jobbik party in Hungary. We have the Attack party in Bulgaria, who proposed the opening of concentration camps for Roma. At this point, we have Slovakia, who proposed to put their children in mentally disabled schools. They are already, but they want to put all of them in mentally disabled schools. And basically, we have statements such as of French Prime Minister saying that Hitler did not kill enough of them. It was a Roma Holocaust, which actually it's called the Forgotten Holocaust. And I'll talk more about it. I'm just going to go. Also has increased tensions between and among EU member states and the EU commissions. The states that have the most, that have a large Roma population, particularly Romania and Bulgaria, are kept out of the Schengen space, explicitly kept out of the Schengen space in Europe because of their Roma population. As you know, in the Schengen area, you can move without passport, without anything. So Romania and Bulgaria will not go explicitly said because of the existence of this population on their territory. Also, Europe has witnessed very recently a wave of, again, anti-Gypsies, violence against Roma settlement, burning of their settlement, and settlements, and other type of violence that increased, particularly in Hungary, in France, where they dismantled their camps, and in other countries. There are a lot of reasons for which this type, this population, this ethnicity, I'm going to call it, impacts actually the politics in the European Union at a time where things are extremely tense. Now, that said, I want to give you a quick background so you understand when I talk about what we know right now is what we didn't know maybe 50 years ago so much that we know right now. Basically, you have to know that Roma is not a unified population. When I put Roma there, basically it is formed from subgroups. And those subgroups actually, even if they do not practice anymore, they're traditional or occupational, let's say activities that united them in subgroups, they still keep to themselves. They call themselves in a different way, some of them occupationally, where people, that blacksmiths, for instance, that were do all sorts of pots, or people that were musicians, or people that will take specialize on taking gold out from the riverbeds. And I'm saying riverbeds, I put in my book proposal waterbeds. And the editor wrote me back, said, waterbed? I said, oh, I thought it's the same thing with a riverbed. I'm sorry. Apparently it's not the same thing. Taking the gold from waterbeds. So there are, what I want to say, and because it's going to be important for my presentation further, is that we're dealing with various Roma subgroups. We don't know yet how many. There is a Manchester project of millions of euros that is going on in order to figure out how many Roma groups we have in Europe and how many languages they are speaking. Anyway, this is a map that has been somehow constructed, and I'm going to go further, on the basis of absolutely no historical document about their migration, but on the basis of the languages that they speak, looking at the origin of their languages, and on the basis of new analysis, DNA analysis, that shows us that they migrated sometimes probably 1,000 years ago through this route. They reached the Byzantine Empire and they spread in Europe from there. Linguistic-wise, they have Persian, Armenian, and Greek in their language, so that allows us for the reconstructions of migration routes. DNA shows a link to the northern part of India, the Punjab region of India. So I'll talk more about this when I'm going to get to my argument. Also, before I get to my argument, quickly, there were two opposing views of Roma all the time. Particularly in the 19th century, in the British-speaking world, the Roma has been highly idealized. They were considered exotic. There were lots of movies. Their women were hypersexualized, actually, in England, and in Spain too, with the flamenco dance, which is a very interesting dance that does not necessarily belong only to the Gypsies, to the Gitanos. It has Arab elements in, but my assistant actually, that's a little bit of going out of the topic, discovered that the Gitanos in Spain will tell you that, and everybody knows flamenco and considers it very provocative dance. The Gitanos in Spain will tell you that that dance, stepping up the feet and bending up the eyes, is just a dance of much less is not a dance of seduction. It's a dance of resentment, of hate towards the fact that they were obliged, in order for protection, to dance for their patrons. It's a very interesting interpretation of the flamenco dance, in which you see a lot of resentment, actually, some people confusing it with a way of attraction. So there are various interpretations. The other image of Roma is the one that we get today, extremely poor. We get it all over the news, all over the press, beggars, stealers, and you know, one of, as I said, the most discriminated population of Europe, more or less differs in certain states. Probably, I looked at Alexei, in a better situation in Russia, actually, than in other countries in Europe. That said, if you look at how they are in Eastern Europe, the area that I'm looking at, the countries in blue are the ones that have more, the 12% of the population being Roma, and you see Romania, Bulgaria, and Macedonia, with a lot of them. Romania particularly, we don't know how many. I spoke with a lot of activists. Probably some of them, they think there might be between 1.5 and 2.5 million of Roma in Romania, although the last census identifies only 600,000. So only 600,000 identify themselves, let's put it this way, as being the Roma. It kind of dilutes if you go, you know, the percentage as you go further west. Particularly Romania has the largest population because in the 19th century, actually, they had the worst treatment in Romania. They were enslaved. Until the formation of in the 19th century of the Romanian modern state, they were not liberated. Their treatment actually in every country and all over Europe, it has been terrible. I wrote an article about this, contending that the discrimination against them, it's actually a function of power differential. They never had the power. They were always discriminated against. The powerful does as it pleases, yeah? The weak does as it must. Now my thesis. Now, the thesis is constructivist in essence, so I want to explore how Romani ethnicity on one hand, and on the other hand, Romani ethno-mobilization have impacted each other in Eastern Europe after the fall of the Berlin Wall. I'm going to go quickly, and I'm going to tell you that I define ethnicity. I see ethnicity on two pillars. Taking a constructivist approach to ethnicity, we have primordial approaches, situational approaches, which is the same with instrumental approaches and constructivist approaches. This is a constructivist approach to ethnicity that brings identity and culture together. I do not discard the cultural facts, as the instrumentalists do. And I'm studying the impact between their ethnicity and ethno-mobilization. And by ethno-mobilization, I do mean a process by which people come together on the basis of ethnicity in order to obtain certain goals. I'm going to have to explore, and it's a hard thing to do. First of all, to show how the Romani ethnicity started the process of mobilization, and second, how ethno-mobilization impacts the process. So what am I doing quickly? First, I'm saying that and showing the Romani ethno-mobilization started in Eastern Europe mainly after the fall of the Berlin Wall, because before it was communist and they could not mobilize each other. What did they have at two conditions? And here I'm not sure, I'm still thinking at Reiko's observation, it's a background condition or not. There were two political opportunities, which I call. One was the fall of the Berlin Wall and the start of transitions and democratization, where groups were allowed to mobilize. And the second was the existence of a Romani international elite with very few ties to the originally Romani subgroup that I show you. So there was a Romani elite, and they were not tied. They were much more cosmopolitan, will be the word. But they kept their Romani identity, but they did not identify necessarily with one group or another. And that elite played a great role in their mobilization. Then, what is that ethnicity that existed there in the 90s in Eastern Europe? So, on the one hand, it was an ethnicity, basically it was an identity, I should say, created by the others. We call them Gypsies, or Tsigani. They don't call themselves like this, and they see themselves in a different way. So it was this identity created by us, and what existed also existed the identity of the subgroups that call themselves, as I said, Lovara, Zegari, whatever other names. So this is where that elite had to start, that international elite. This is what they had to work with. Now, once ethno-mobilization started, Romani activists basically did two things. Launch the process, that one thing, of ethnicity construction. First, they struggled to use forms of collective identification. Since I'm saying identity, it's a part of ethnicity, collective identification by introducing the word Roma, which was never used, actually, in Eastern Europe, coming from a Sanskrit word, Rom, that they used to, as an adjective, sometimes in certain language, to call each other. So this Roma, it is basically a clear construction of their activist, of their political or ethnic activists, call it the way you want. That was the first process. In the second process, it was a process initiated by their activists trying to do a cultural renovation. And by this, what I'm saying, and it's still in the making, they try to construct a history, a common ancestry, a common language, and by that, trying to bring them together, strengthen the ethnicity back from ethno-mobilization back to ethnicity. Now, in terms of my identity, I said we had two actors as boundary inscribers. First were non-Roma that didn't see any difference among these groups and called them in Eastern Europe Tsigani or Tsigani, Tigoni, whatever, coming from a Greek name actually that means untouchable. Do not touch, it's a Greek name. The English word gypsy comes from the word Egyptian because for hundreds of years has been believed that those people come out of Egypt as origin, and they were wrongly identified with Egyptians. And there is another element to boundary constructions, which is identity basically. It's constructed by both sides, and the Romani per se people they call any other people that are not Romani Gage. They used to draw a line. Most of their group used the word Gage, not all of them, to identify people who are not of their own origin. So there has been a big gap. Now, what the ethno-mobilization thought to do, creation of new identity, promoting newly coined terms in Eastern European language, as I said, Romovi, Rom, Romi, in order to unify them. Now, the question to me is here right now, how can I prove that back? This new created form of identification strengthen their ethnicity, because this is what I said I will do. And basically what we found is that actually when you run studies, one or other on them, in Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary, they started to identify themselves more as Romani, Roma, than as the group. It's taking place. I'm not saying that all groups in Eastern Europe accept that term, because they don't. There are groups that do not. There are actually groups that still think, and those are in the territory of former Yugoslavia, the Ashkali, that they still think they come from Afghanistan, and some other groups that think they come from Egypt. But those are very minor groups. But we do see a more use of the term Romani in these communities, which basically, in a way, makes my point that ethno-mobilization did have an impact on identity. Now, the second thing that quickly I have to show is what are we doing in terms of culture? So what the Romani mobilization did in terms of culture. But before that, I have to tell you the Romani culture is not at all, has never been a unified culture, and we have several things. First of all, various Romani groups speak different dialects of what is called Romanes, their language. And some of them are not intelligible, apparently. I'm still waiting the results of the Manchester project. I may be waiting another 10 years. It took them probably 2 or 3 years only to map 70 dialects on the territory of Romania. And they aren't sure that they mapped everything. Romani subgroups are generally endogamous, and there is a lot of evidence in this sense. Of course, you cannot run a study and go and ask them, are you an endogamous person? But in terms of people who want hard evidence, we do have hard evidence, hate to talk about, but it's there, and people are studying DNA evidence that these groups did not intermarry. For centuries, hard evidence. They would rather marry into the population, the main population, where they are that allow intermarriage among groups, subgroups. That is something that it's highly unusual. Now, as a result of that, there are further avenues to explore. This population has a lot of diseases that are typical to endogamy. Some Eastern European Romani subgroups keep the Romani courts. Romani courts basically are their own law that they go by. Those are the most conservative groups. They are called, in the United States of America, I saw several publications called Romani Cris. Apparently the Cris word of the Gypsy court comes from some kind of Greek word that will called judgment. However, in my going on Eastern Europe and talking to the Romani, I did not find the word Cris used by any of those groups. They use Divanos, Tabore, other type of names, which make me look pretty bad when I was, do you have the Cris? And they were looking at me like, what? I said, I have this book published in the US, says that. Never heard of that. Oh, you're talking about Stabore. Oh, you're talking about, something else. So basically, those are very traditional population that keep their own type of judgment, judge their own traditional groups, judge their own people according to their own rules. They are not the majority. So the majority does not keep that. So they are split on the use or not use of the Romani groups. Also, they have different histories, and that is because they lived in different countries after they come in Eastern Europe. Certainly, the Romanian Romani were enslaved. In the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they used to take the children completely away from them. That's where Slovakia got that, and put them in some kind of institution in order to educate them. Thing that did not work anymore. But no matter how you look at it, their women were sterilized extensively. In the Czech Republic, there is a scandal on the roll. There was a scandal on the roll even 2 years ago about the sterilization of Romani women that took place. But historically, their women were sterilized, and they became, actually, they always were the pariah of Europe. They do have, those groups have different histories depending where they were put. They also were heavily deported by the British. That's why we found them in Australia, we found them in British colonies in Africa, and heavily deported by the Spanish. That's why we found them in Latin America. One that people think mostly is nomadic versus sedentary. The Roma of Eastern Europe became mostly sedentary during the communist time because it was forced settlement. The communists forced them to settle. But in the other, I'm not talking about the Western part, they have still groups that travel right now and have a different culture. I want to make a note because some people ask me, the Irish travelers, if they are Gypsy or not. The Irish travelers, according to the last DNA test, are not related to this population. So they belong to an ancestral population that existed in Ireland. So they are natives of Ireland. Now, so what do you do with that in order to create as a young activist in order to create a stronger identity, to ask for more, you know, to have a better organization. You're trying to play on common ancestry, and you're trying to tell everybody, you know, common ancestry is something extremely important sometimes for certain ethnic group, because it's the myth of the nation that started in a certain point. So the Indian origin has been brought over and over in the discourse. It had actually very negative consequences in some Eastern European countries, because when that came clearly in Hungary, no, the Hungarians came out and they said, oh, you're from India, just go back home then. In the history, I showed you a little bit, they used the language to construct their migration routes, their history, and also they are using extensively the Holocaust, which they call porajmus, the forgotten Holocaust, to bring together various groups, because all of them were incinerated, most of them were incinerated. They have the same history like the Jewish people during the Nazi regimes all over Eastern Europe. But, you know, very little has been written. So documents are dug right now about their deportations, their incineration, their life in concentration camps, how many of them ever escaped from the Nazi. However, unlike in the Jewish case, the Nazi did not bother to count them. So we do not know exactly how many of them were killed in the Holocaust. But the Holocaust is highly used in order to create a more unified sense of identity among various Romani subgroups. Language is a big problem, because language is an element that brings people together. And some of them, they do not speak at all any form of Romanes, and therefore that is highly considered. There is a debate if they should be considered or not Romanes in their community, and others speak various dialects, and it's very difficult to bring them together. However, I'll tell you, since I'm Facebooking with them on different groups, I can see that one of the dialect that is mostly used, now that I know, I had to ask, I had to ask linguists, it's one of the Vlax Romani coming from the Subcarpathian region that apparently tends to spread and to become accepted by some groups as being some kind of the Romani language, accepted by only some groups. In terms of religions, they have the religion of the country in which they live. So some of them will be Christian Orthodox, some of them will be Catholics or Protestant. However, after the 19th, particularly in Eastern Europe, we have a lot of Protestant currents spreading, and they are attracted by that, and you cannot blame them, because the church was part of the discrimination for centuries against them. So there is a Romani evangelism that is on the rise. And again, we will see how much that will have an influence. However, in a particular group in Transylvania, they call themselves Gabors, apparently has a high influence. They don't even want to be called gypsy or recognize there are any kind of gypsies. They point to the fact that they have right now a work ethic that is a Western work ethic, because they are evangelicals, they work, they clean themselves and proudly wear some kind of hat. I should have. The image here, I didn't want to put disturbing images, gathering them to get them in a concentration camp. There are very disturbing images of Romani in concentration camps. Now my conclusions. What did they accomplish in the mobilization? Their activists got to have the Roma recognized as an ethnic minority. They built the boundaries very well, and they got in exchange some things that are good in some countries, such as something similar to what we have in the United States of America, allowing for them to go to school without money, you know, certain stuff. But what is very hard, identification goes better. What is very hard to overcome is various differences and cultural differences between those Romani group. To create a much more unified culture is hard, very hard to overcome. The Holocaust seems to hit right now and help that more. And with that, as conclusion, I'm going to say that looking through that, I will have a recommendation for them. What is going on, their activists seem to be a little bit disconnected because mostly of them are not connected to the groups and subgroups, I should say. Seems to be disconnected from what's going on the ground exactly. So what they have to do basically is to get in touch more and more and much deeper with the local Romani community. It's very hard for them, and one reason for which will be hard is because most of these activists are people who got degrees in the Western world, got out of the community, and right now it's very hard to go back to the community since the Romani, most of them, they have certain laws called Marin, in which if you live for a long time with the Gaje, you're not considered a Romani anymore. So their most activists, most educated activists may have trouble in certain cases to get back into communities. They will have to find a way, and they already in Romania are finding a way by using certain mediators selected from Romani communities to enter the communities and to talk to them. And with that, I'll leave it there, and I'm going to open it for questions. Thank you very much for listening. Yes, there.
Have you explored in your research the mobilization of the Roma group to other continents such as Africa or America?
No, I am not there yet, but I have to tell you I am highly interested to explore that once I'm done with what I'm done, Latin America. But I'm going to need a lot of help. First of all, I'm going to need to perfect my Spanish, and then I have been already told that come hell and high water, that I'm going to penetrate any kind of Romani community in Latin America. They are extremely close, but maybe I can do it. I'm very interested to explore that. I'm not there yet.
Dr. Thornton, two questions. First, well, we know that Holocaust is sometimes mistakenly confused with only the extermination of Jewish people, and some scholars just forget about the Roma. So how many Romani people were exactly exterminated by the Nazi regime? And second, well, I would like to speak from the Russian perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, disturbing fact that in Russia, Romani people are considered the biggest drug cartel, and really these groups, these gangs are even stronger than ethnic crime gangs from Central Asia. It doesn't necessarily mean that Romani people are bad or evil, as some portray them. But why are they so prone to this kind of crimes?
Well, I'm going to first, what was your first question? Because
Romani people were killed.
Oh, yeah. Well, I do not know how many. I think I said that. We don't know how many. We believe in millions, but we do not know because the Nazi did not keep a record of how many people, Roma people, they didn't think that these people deserve even a record. Like the Jewish people did deserve. So we do not know. We believe that maybe 1.5 million may have killed and deported in Romania only during the Holocaust, but we don't know for sure. My assistant still, she's trying to look and see what data we have there. Now, with respect to what you said, I'm just going to stay away because I did not research the issue that you are raising, but I'm going to tell you that there is a lot of sociological material, Alexei, that shows that if you keep pounding a community over and over, giving that community no possibility to participate and share into the process of decision making, if you make them in outcasts and outsiders, doesn't take too long till they may go rogue on you. They have no reason to play by your rules since you exclude them all the time from the decision-making process, and I'm going to leave it at that.
You mentioned that they're excluded from decision-making, but don't they have citizenship, like from Ukraine, and everybody who has a passport of Ukraine can vote and can participate equally?
Yes, that is very true right now, and that's why we talk right now about their ethno-mobilization. That's why we talk right now about party. But think about that till the 90s, they did not have that. So they participated where? In the communist elections? Well, everybody was excluded. Well, they voted for Ceausescu. I mean, nobody participated in anything. However, there were social structure of power, schools and so forth, in which people constantly discriminated against them. So what you're right, that what we're seeing right now, we're seeing an effort from these people to come back and enter the political process. And they are doing it by themselves. So there are parties that they formed in Romania, in Hungary, in the Czech Republic. I'm not sure what's going on in Ukraine, and Russia did not look at that part. And those parties are running into elections. The problem is that, and right now we have picture to show that this is happening. Problem is the community is very poor, and the other party tend to buy their votes. Tend to go and buy their votes with some, how do you call that, that you dry your hair with? Yeah, hair dryer, yeah. Hey, that's so simple. That's why I can't remember. So hair dryers or chocolates, or they are extremely poor, and other parties buy their votes, so they don't exactly vote with their party. So we need this mobilization more strengthened. We need more activists to work with them. They need a lot. They are a long way. After 25 years, they are in the beginning of mobilizing themselves. But you're right, yeah, right now they have this possibility and they are trying to do it. Yes?
You said that they don't speak a common or a single language.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Is it because they are assimilated with other cultures?
Partially, what I've seen linguistically, and I looked at a lot of linguistic forms, including computerized stuff that is called glottochronology, and we have computers that will, and those computerized programs will show us that their language comes from northern India, relation with Bengali and so forth. But if they left 1,000 years ago, right now they think because of certain certain patterns of the languages they speak, that they may have lived in the year 400, actually. Their language differs, and we think they left with certain dialect, because these occupational groups may have spoken different dialects, and getting different routes of migration. In their road, they assimilated some of them more Persian, some of them more Armenian, some of them more Greek. And some of them that stayed on Romania, they assimilated a lot of Romanian words. So therefore, the languages tended to part more and more. You see words in their, whatever they speak dialect, coming from the languages of the countries where they spend most time. So that was one factor that parted the languages. Yes?
Are there any other historical examples of oppressed ethnic groups that were able to successfully socially mobilize and get more political or economic rights that the Roma might be able to use as a example or a blueprint to how they can succeed?
I have looked at the Native Americans, in which you have different identities, and then you try to create a Native American identity that never existed, and it's pretty much similar. But what we have here is a strong feeling in the Native American communities, and I didn't look closely, but all of a sudden, from my factors that came immediately, the Native Americans belong to this land. They feel like they belonged. Now, what you have here, it's a group that is traveling, it's moving, so they don't have that mother country. They don't have it. And in this, to answer directly to your question, I know of certain groups in Southern Asia that they occupationally, they go and they don't necessarily have a mother country, but the myth of, the inexistent myth, from where you are, impeded them tremendously. That's all I found till now, and differentiates them from the Native Americans. Yes?
How much conflict and barriers are being raised by it seems that three major groups are trying to assert themselves about this dominance of what is a Romani in this group. You have the states that they live in that are creating laws. You have the overarching Romani activists, and then you have the Romani themselves that are trying to do. How much barrier is that causing in your research to actually identify when you're trying to work through these three groups?
I said this, I think this is a wonderful question, and when I put weak ethno-mobilization, I'm looking at the factors for which not only identity they couldn't mobilize so well. One is the state that on the one hand says, as you know, I'm going to help you and give you this, but on the other hand, the discrimination is very high against them. One is those activists that their relation with the state is pretty poor because they are very unhappy with those states. So they don't necessarily work together. And one is the fact that I mentioned that they cannot penetrate deep into the Romani community. And you know that because you've been on a territory, how difficult it is. And even if you penetrate there according, and you can go with a test, okay, with a set of questions. Because certainly, according to Zoltan Boroni that tried, he's a Hungarian, and tried for 10 years to do that, he got some results, but he doesn't believe in what they answer to him. They answer whatever you think, they think you should, and you know, should or you want to hear, basically. So we cannot be, but there is a tension between the national level, their NGOs, and the community that weakens. When I said weak ethno-mobilization, I refer to this tension. Yes? Mm-hmm.
I have a question. Do you think that it is not only the internal mobilizations, but also the trying to change the biased perception of this nation by outside groups, the majority? I mean, for example, even in Ukraine, it's always like mothers teaching their children, like, stay away, those are Tsigani, like, they're like, is it important also to give them some power, or is it even possible to try to change the perception and of those biased vision of them as drug dealers or like threat or something, or
yes,
it's more important their own mobilization? Like,
I want to say that this is part of the mobilization, to get rid of the stereotypes that we all grew up with, like you, I grew up like you. I mean, if you don't behave, we're going to give you to the gypsies. You know, if you say another word, we're going to put you in the road, you know, and those people are going to take you, and it's going to be horrible what's going to happen to you, so I had to behave. So those stereotypes exist there, and particularly, and I'm going to answer your question, but particularly the idea of the gypsies take children. And I did a lot of work to see where is it coming from. And guess where is it coming from, or what I found? That actually during medieval times, and then 18th centuries or even 19th centuries, young ladies of wealthy families that will have a child out of the wedlock. That was not acceptable. So what their parents were doing were taking the children and they were giving it to the gypsies. So somehow we have some DNA of the population getting rid of that child. And the gypsies, they had their own children, they were poor, but they took the child in too and made it one of their own. So they were getting, so from this comes this idea that somehow gypsies are stealing children. Initially, no, they were given the children. So it's an extreme, but this is one of the stereotypes that we can debug. Now, their economic condition, it is so bad right now, and they are highly discriminated. So where experiments were conducted in various countries, one was conducted in Romania, a male that considered himself that can look more or less like them. The look is not quite something that, there are even blonde, blue-eyed gypsies, so this is not something that, but he dressed semi-gypsy and tried to get a job, for a month every day. He was a journalist, nobody hired him. Now then, he took his dressing or whatever, makeup off, he went to get a job, he got a job in 2 days. on the same credential. So discrimination is extremely high. So experiments like this were conducted. So they are trying to get away of the stereotypes, but if I will play recordings that I have with them, well, you know, the community is so mad that right now I don't think it's quite the conversation, it's a good conversation. Basically, their activists are calling Angela Merkel and Sarkozy, he's not there, but it's when I recorded, Nazi. And they're Nazi. So their activists don't have the right language right now. So that's something that they should learn how to approach power and how to enter in the center of power. I understand that power oppresses, believe me, but also this attitude is not gonna help forever. You need to start a better conversation with the majority. So they have a problem in how they approach this issue in order to get rid of those stereotypes, but they are trying. Yes? Yes, and then I'm gonna go to
Dr. Thornton, with respect to extreme nationalist movements and trend in Europe, especially in Hungary, how do you see how these Roma communities are going to be influenced? Because what's going on in Hungary now, you showed us the video, right? Mm-hmm. They're Nazis now, so Roma people, is there a possibility that they might be ousted from these territories?
Yeah, I showed you the video. In the video that she's referring to, it is a video of a rally of the Jobbik party calling for the extermination of the Romani people and of the Jewish people in the same video, actually. They will be pushed from the territory. There are skinheads in Hungary that are burning their settlement. However, the Magyar Guard has been banned, the one that did whatever it did. You have to remember, they won't be ousted from their territory because where are you going to put them? I mean, you're going to send them to Romania? What are you going to do with them? But you have to realize that this is a population that survived for 1,000 years, 1,000 years under this condition. I'm going to have to trust that they find a way to survive, even if the conditions are so bad, and I'm going to have to hope that the activists that are working for their education, for more education of children, that they are fighting, will get a better generation. But they won't give up. They will just stay. I mean, those are survivors. Yes?
So the cultural differences being hard to overcome, that's a big obstacle for the ethno-mobilization.
Yes.
Have you had any ideas of other cultural similarities to research, potentially maybe an ethnic religion or something that could help? I know that they've assimilated into the cultures that they're in now. You said a lot of Protestant religions now and some Orthodox. Are there any other approaches, any other angles to look at for similarities in the culture that might help speed up ethnic?
I have to say, I'm not saying with certainty because I just opened a line of research on the evangelism in other groups of like Baptist groups that are activated, even Mormon groups that are activating there. And the Romani tend to congregate against those groups. And I said first and foremost because they were not part of their oppression. And second, because they are approaching them with help, with understanding. So the Romani tend to congregate more or less, you know, and well, I have knowledge of other groups. Look, I have the hope, I don't know, this is a process, but I have the hope that this kind of religious orientation will help them more than the churches of the countries that were traditional there. So my hope is that this is an element and opening another avenue of research that I'm finding here, that I have to open, that this element of introducing new type of religions that are coming from the West may help the community much more than we think. So I don't have a better answer, I'm sorry, at this point. Yes?
Dr. Thornton, you talked about a sort of an elite of indigenous culture, an elite of people. To what extent could the the increasing demand for power just be a result of this group of people just wanting more for their own interests, economic interests, political interests, and not as a result of a community-wide push?
That is a great question. First of all, because the mobilization started top-down, we can suspect that some of these activists actually are seeking power for themselves. And this is not something that we don't see in other mobilization. We see that in feminist mobilization, too. I mean, people want to seek power for themselves and could care less about, but you know, we see this in other type of mobilizations. And there is a very good book that came out showing that actually the Roma mobilization, partially these activists are interested in seeking power for themselves and less in helping the community. How many and how, I do not have a clear answer to write a paper right now, but I'm telling you, I read about that, it is there, and I believe it is true. And what I will tell you I believe it is true is because in my research and talk to them, going from one NGO to another political party, I'm hearing, oh, don't listen to that political party. They don't do anything for Roma. Okay, it's their political party. I'm going to another NGO, Roma NGO, and I'm hearing, oh, don't listen to the others. The others don't do anything. Hey, so we see indeed lines here. We don't see, it's weak mobilization. They don't really come together, and I suspect that what I'm hearing is because some people will seek power. But do I have a clear research to show you? No, but it is my guess that this is the truth. Yes.
We may have time for one quick question.
Yeah.
Gabriela, has their cause been taken up by the OSCE, which has an Office for National Minorities, or the European Parliament, or any institutional support that is multinational?
Larry, has been taken by all European institutions, all of them, the European Commission, the OSCE, I mean, the Council of Europe, and in this particular, and ties in probably in this question, there were probably in 25 years, I don't want to exaggerate, but I think there were hundreds of millions of euros that were put for the development of this community. What happened is that the money were given to the states, and somehow they didn't get to the community. Right now, it is stuck to direct all money that are coming to particular communities. That's one thing, Larry. We don't know. Some activists, you know, became very rich. It ties into what he said. The state just, you know. And the other thing, Larry, is that we don't have that education in these communities. What happened with microfinancing, certain money, they were left in banks because the Roma don't want to deal with the banks. Right. It's not in their tradition to go to the bank, get a loan, and start a business. So there is need for more education. But yes, Larry, there were a lot of money. The United States participated in the decade of Roma inclusion. Larry, Hillary Clinton was there. People were recognizing that America is trying to help. Bottom line right now, they are waking up. You can't give the money to those states.